We are at Wilma Dykeman's 103rd birthday anniversary. She was born May 20th, 1920, so this is her exact 103rd birthday. Wilma Dykeman was an extraordinary woman, born in just north of Asheville at the head of the Beaver Dam Valley on May 20th, and died 86 years later, a little more than 86 years later, at Care Partners Solace Hospice on the Sweeten Creek Road. But in between those bookends in Buncombe County, she traveled far and wide. She was an excellent writer in multiple genres, memoir, novel, essay, biography, nonfiction. She was also a great speaker, a world-class speaker. So she believed in both the written word and the spoken word. She combined those two elements, and that's the definition of synergy. And when you got one person who is a good writer and a good speaker, they can really get their message across. And that's what Wilma did for 86 years, at a time when women were really second-class citizens throughout the nation, and especially in the Southern Mountains. She was experienced gender discrimination about every day of her life, but she soldiered through. And she did not soldier through with a scowl on her face. She was a happy, optimistic person. And that was part of the strength. She served as a great role model for women, young and old, in the Mid-South in the middle years of the 20th century. So basically, the Wilma Dykeman Legacy, a nonprofit organization organized to promote and sustain Wilma's three core values of environmental integrity, social justice, the power of the written and spoken word. We've been in operation since 2012. And the idea here is every year at about this time, Saturday afternoon closest to Wilma's birthday, we get together at Black Wall Street in partnership with Black Wall Street and put together an event focused on social justice, but also featuring the power of the spoken word. And today we have two great spoken word performers. I'm going to introduce the first, and her name is Becky Stone. Becky will introduce the second performer. But I want to say three things about Becky. First, Becky is an accomplished actor, educator, Chautauquan performer. She's performed one-woman shows all across the country for Chautauqua based upon Sarah Gudger, Jacqueline Baker, Josephine Baker, Maya Angelou, Harriet Tubman, and others. That's the first thing. The second thing is that she is on the board of the Wilma Dykeman Legacy and has helped us in so many ways, from helping our strategic planning initiatives to helping organize this event. And thirdly, and this is the most important, Becky Stone is a wise and kind person. Becky Stone.
Oh, thank you, Jim. It is a pleasure to be here to share some stories with you. And it's also been a pleasure to be a part of the Wilma Dykeman board. I have, as a Chautauquan, I have researched African American women in American history, and it's. I'm not a professor. I'm not an academic. It's just out of an interest for wanting to know where we come from and how we got here. And when I moved to this region about 40 years ago, I was fascinated by the stories of people in these mountains, and started to work with Deborah Miles on pulling programs together for school children so that they would appreciate the people and the cultures that meet here. And the Wilma Dykeman Legacy has been an extension of that. I'm in the process of trying to find the stories. I spent some time talking with Andrea over there, who guided me to a few other people that I have talked with. And the first person I talked to after spending an afternoon with Andrea was a man who was 92, maybe, when I first met with him. And I want to share some of his story with you. This is Asheville. And this was Asheville. Asheville had been a tourist destination for well over 100 years, before the Civil War. And like the rest of the South in the Civil War, this was a slave-holding territory. Oh, and after the Civil War, it remained, as the rest of the South, a segregated territory. So, white people wanted to keep everything comfortable. They knew colored folks, they knew Jewish folks, maybe a few Cherokee folks, but they didn't want them so close that they were uncomfortable. So there were sections. There were black neighborhoods, east, west, south, and north. Stumptown, Shiloh, South Side. Everyone had to stay in their place. So that was the Asheville that Matthew Bacoate was born into in 1930. Not much going on for black folks here, except community. And what a community it was. Everyone working together and living together, lovely homes, gardens, businesses, a hospital, colored churches, colored schools. There were hotels for Negroes who were traveling, Negro and colored being appropriate terms in those days. Rabbit's Motel also housed a restaurant. The Booker T. Washington Hotel also housed a theater. There was the Owl Lounge, and just above it, the dentist's office. It was a vibrant and vital community, although restricted and contained and truncated by segregation. Well, Matthew grew up, went to school, and when the Korean War came along, he enlisted in the Army. And it was in the Army, he says, that he learned to get by on 3 hours of sleep a day, which is what he gets by on to this day in his 90s. He had 2 jobs. He was the medical records specialist, but also the assistant manager of the Army's non-commissioned officers' open mess hall. And he did his work well. He was efficient. When he got things done, there was more time, so he did more things. And so he was hardworking, and he was intelligent. He learned, and he was trustworthy. To this day, he stands by the importance, the very simple law of telling the truth. Telling the truth gets you far more benefit than making up stories. And as Mark Twain said, it's always better to tell the truth. You don't have to remember anything. So, everyone who worked with Matthew Bacoate or who employed Matthew Bacoate knew he had these wonderful characteristics, strength of character. When the war ended and he came back to Asheville, he needed work. And there were plenty of places that turned him down, but finally he saw a posting that the Chamber of Commerce needed a mail clerk from 9 a.m. in the morning until 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And he got that job. The only black person working there. And he got 2 more jobs. He had an hour after he finished at the chamber to get to the Boss Distribution Center, a local bakery where he delivered baked goods from 2 in the afternoon until 7 in the evening when he had an hour to get to his next job, which was custodian at the Star Lanes bowling alley there on Kenilworth Avenue. He worked there. It was open 24 hours a day, except on Sundays. They closed at 5. But Matthew worked there until 8 a.m. and then he had to get to his mail clerk job. But he was such a good, efficient worker that the owner of the Star Lanes was Sam Irving. When his night manager left the position, he coerced Matthew into taking that job. Matthew, the night manager position is open and I want you to take it. If you do not take it, you will not have a job here at Star Lanes. What was he to do? He thought about it for a day or so, he says, but then he took that job. And just like all his other jobs, he tightened up all the loose ends, got everything done efficiently, and there was time for him to think about when the bowling alley closed on Sundays at 5, all those lanes sat there empty. His mind turned to the Black community. Wouldn't it be great if colored folks could come in here and bowl on Sunday evenings? They'd have to learn how to bowl. I mean, how many Black people knew how to bowl back then? There was not a place to play. He would convince Mr. Irving to let him bring the Black community in to bowl on those lanes. He did it. It was over several conversations, but eventually Mr. Irving agreed with 2 conditions. 1, Matthew could open the lanes on Sunday evenings at 5, but he was not to let any white people come in and bowl the same time that colored were bowling in his lanes. Okay, Matthew agreed to that. And he said, the only people who can come in here to bowl have to be your friends, preachers, teachers. He clearly didn't want any riffraff. So Matthew agreed. Well, he was ready to get going, but he knew that Black folks didn't know how to bowl. How was he going to instruct everyone? Well, there was another white bowling alley out on Merriman Avenue, the Asheville Bowling Center, and they had hired 3 Black men to be pin setters. They knew how to bowl. So he got those fellows to join him, and all he had to do was find the bowlers. And when the word got out in the Black community that on Sunday evenings you could come and bowl at Star Lanes Bowling Center, people came. The first Sunday, he opened 12 lanes. He had 4 people bowling in each lane, and the 4 instructors. It had to have been a great evening because the following Sunday, all 24 lanes were full. And it was another social, recreational opportunity for the Black community. Sundays at 5 at the Star Lanes alleys. But then one Sunday evening, there was a knock at the door, or should I say a banging at the door, and Matthew went over to see who was there, and there were a bunch of white men there. They knew him, he knew them. They were regulars from all the other hours that the lanes were open. They all worked for the paper, Asheville Citizen, Asheville Times, and when they got off at 2 2 in the morning, they would always come out bowling just to let off a little steam. So they knew each other. Matt, he said, can we come in and bowl? He knew he shouldn't, but he let them in. And they came in, and they bowled with colored folks in the lanes right next to them. For 3 months this went on before the owner got wind of it. And then he confronted Matthew. Matthew, you know that the only reason I let you do this is you were expressing not to let white and colored bowl in the same time. You had agreed to this. Well, Matthew defended himself and pointed out to Mr. Irving all the increased revenue that was coming in on what used to be dead hours there at the lanes. And Mr. Irving took a sigh and then said, all right, Matthew, do you know what you have done? No, said Matthew. He said, you have integrated the first privately owned public facility here in Asheville, North Carolina. It was as easy and as simple as that. Or was it? No, not exactly. There were people, of course, who were angry about this happening, did not want integration to come to Asheville or any part of this country, as a matter of fact. However, Sam Irving was well connected and a member of the Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber of Commerce knew that this would be a good thing for this city to integrate peacefully, without violence. It's a tourist town. Tourists would be happy to come to this lovely southern city and not be afraid. So there were no national headlines. This was working. And it got so that the chamber wanted to expand Black enterprise beyond the Black neighborhood. And so they knew that they could connect people in the Black community to people in the white community who would enable them to open a manufacturing company. They already had the perfect manager in Matthew, and he was also the perfect person connected to the Black community. So when they first addressed him about it, Matthew says that he said no, because he didn't trust that they were not just going to be a Black front for white people operating and controlling all of the money and the profits. But once he was convinced of their commitment, he found the Black investors, and he managed the first Black-owned and Black-run manufacturing company of its kind in the United States. But that's a story for another time. Thank you for listening. Thank you.